Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Talking with Teal. And today we are going to do, first of all, I'm Ryan Akade, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. So here I am with William Daniels, and William is not in the screen yet. But these are the two questions that we're going to pursue today, and I'll read them just in case people can't see. The first one on the left: is there a better system than money and finance for managing human affairs? And if success or failure of this planet and of human beings depend on how I am and what I do, how would I be and what would I do? And more can be found on William's website, billionsofbillionaires.org. So, William, how are you?
Good, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Great to have you.
Thank you. You did that really well, by the way.
Why, thank you. Those are two very engaging questions, and I thought we could start with you sharing first a little bit about yourself and your life and what inspired you in inquiring into these two questions on economics and finance.
You know, it's interesting, Ryan. There is literally one item that I have left from school. I don't have my class ring. I don't have report cards. I have nothing but one paper that I wrote, and I think it was in about 10th grade. And I was talking about how Christmas had become, we were losing sight of what Christmas was, and it's all about the mighty money machine. And so really, pretty much all my life, I've kind of been aware of money and issues around money, and so it really kind of goes back to there. The question, and then I worked with Buckminster Fuller briefly in 80, late 82, late 82, and I was actually in San Diego one day for a seminar, and at the end of the seminar, I went to the beach, sitting on the beach, and that question came to me: if the success or failure of this planet and of human beings depended on how I am and what I do, how would I be? What would I do? It was like, wow, it's an interesting question. So I published, actually after Bucky died, I worked with his grandson, Jamie Snyder, and I put that together as a card. And that was the question on the front of the card, and Bucky's map of the world, the Dymaxion map of the world. And then a quote from Bucky, which actually I'll, on the inside of the card is a quote from Bucky. And he said, "If humanity does not opt for integrity, we are through completely. It is absolutely touch and go. Each one of us could make the difference." And that's actually what I worked with him on, was Integrity Day with Buckminster Fuller. That was the specific thing we were working on. And then so I continued doing research, and there was, and one of the just kind of like wow moments was when I looked up the definition of economics. And luckily I looked it up, and it was a definition that did not include the words money or finance. There was nothing about money or finance. It said economics is a social study that deals with the production, distribution, and use of goods and services. It's like, no word about money, so okay, we can research economics completely independently of money and finance. Let's do it. And then at some point, since then, the last 20, 30 years, this question, is there a better system than money and finance for managing human affairs, that kind of became the question that I've been researching and sharing the results of my research with, and talking with people about. Yeah.
Excellent,
And
excellent.
yeah, and so what's on my blog is the basis of a book that I have written. There's more coming, but that's kind of the basis of the book I'm writing about these issues.
Great. And you had mentioned that you worked with a very big name, Buckminster Fuller. And could you just
Right.
explain who he was for people who don't know?
Um, he's most famous, I think, for as being the inventor of the geodesic dome. People pretty much, certainly in the last century, he was really well known around the world as the inventor of the geodesic dome. Uh, Epcot Center at Disney World in Florida, that is a geodesic dome. And on many of the schools and playgrounds these days, there are these little semicircular um, monkey bar type structures that are based on triangles. That's a geodesic dome. And he coined the term spaceship Earth. Bucky balls are named for him. So he, he was thrown out of Harvard twice, and then ultimately received something like 20 plus honorary doctorates from universities around the world
Wow.
for the work that he did. And he essentially early on said that, well, he recognized that for the most part, what we do, what people do, what humans do is we work for the success of ourselves, our family, our extended family, our community, our country, and our country's allies. And it's against all the other people in the world, all the other countries and their allies. So he said that's as far as we get for the most part. He said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to devote my life to researching what one individual without a formal higher education uh, can do for the success of all humanity. So he devoted his life to that. He said, what information do we need? What tools do we need? And what strategies do we need if we want everybody to be successful? So that was the guiding principle of his life. And what he produced was really quite remarkable. Like I say, honorary doctorates from universities around the world. He wrote 24 or 28 books. He was, it was really quite amazing what he produced. And to me, and he always said that he's not special. And as somebody who worked with him and who I took him to lunch one time, picked him up from the airport, went to his birthday party. So I was able to be with him both professionally as well as privately. And I can vouch for what he said. If I had met him on the street, I would never know this was a famous person. He was, an ordinary guy. And to me, that really demonstrates the power of where we stand or where we come from. That's the power. When he said, I'm going to see what one individual can do, for the success of all humanity, that to me is like, wow, that's wow. And yeah, so the results that can be produced, from that kind of a place to start, to me is remarkable. And the opportunity then for all of us to make, a contribution that really makes a difference for humanity, as you can see, that moves me. So a little bit of my background and
Wow.
why I'm engaged in this.
Yeah, well, thank you. I could definitely feel the passion and the inspiration, especially
Yeah,
in
yeah.
working with him. And just out of curiosity, what was the kind of work that you did with him?
Well, when I was living in San Diego in 81, 82, and he did an event with Werner Erhard, who was the founder of EST and the EST training that was pretty popular in the 70s and early 80s, and I was a participant in that. So I saw the event that Bucky and Werner did together. And so I got interested in Bucky's work, read his book Critical Path, and then he came and gave a talk in San Diego, and I attended that talk. And then shortly after, I moved to Los Angeles. And shortly after I got there, I heard that Bucky was doing a talk. I think it was in a local church. It was a fairly small event, but nonetheless, I went and I volunteered. I said, "Hey, do you need any help?" So I helped, set up chairs and, just produce the event. And at some point, I'm not sure if it was at that event or shortly after, I met Jamie Snyder, Bucky's grandson, and he invited me to be on the staff of a foundation that he started called the Friends of Buckminster Fuller Foundation. So I joined the staff, and we produced Integrity Day with Buckminster Fuller. It was an all-day event in Los Angeles where Bucky talked about integrity. Broadly speaking, we normally think of integrity as a characteristic, but he also talked about it broadly as being accurate. So one of the examples I remember him talking about is, there's a number of them. Let me see if I can remember. He would say, this is one of my favorite ones. He would say that we have known for 400 or 500 years at least that the Earth is round and that the Earth revolves around the sun. But yet we constantly say sunrise and sunset. The sun does not rise around the Earth. The Earth spins around the sun, and the sun comes into view and then goes out of view. So the words sunrise and sunset are completely inaccurate. He said the appropriate words would be sunsight and sunclipse. And he felt that our using language accurately was really important because, and I've really taken a look at that a lot in the work I've done, and since I've worked with Bucky, then this is 30 years plus, I guess. I can see the validity of that, that we really are sloppy in the language that we use. There was another time, an example that he gave. He said that, and this kind of leading in a little bit different direction, but which also kind of guided me in the work that I'm doing. I remember him saying one time that when he goes down to the ocean and stands at the shore, and the waves are crashing in, and there are millions and billions of bubbles, he said, "I don't think that nature is carrying out the calculation for each one of these bubbles infinitely, because pi is an irrational number, therefore circles and spheres, it's an endless number. It's an infinite calculation." He said, "I don't think nature is doing this." He said, "Therefore, I don't think we've discovered nature's mathematics, nature's coordinate system." When I heard that, again, it was one of those moments that the universe stopped. It was like, oh my God. What he did was he went back to the beginnings, to the foundations of mathematics, and essentially said, is this accurate? Is it useful? Is it valid? Given where we're at today, is this a good place to start? And he said, in terms of mathematics, no. He wrote 2 books on mathematics, Synergetics 1 and Synergetics 2. Now, I studied as much of his work as I could. Those 2 books, even though I didn't study those in detail. I would like to, I just haven't had the chance to do it. But when I saw him doing that, going back to the beginnings of a system, that helped me. So in the work that I do regarding economics, money, and finance, I go to the definitions of those words. And like I said, I looked up the definition of economics. And when I saw that we could look at economics independently of money and finance, I said, okay, so the definition of economics that I use is really the simplest one. There's lots of definitions of economics that I've come across. A lot of them include the word scarcity, which kind of should give us a clue as to what direction most economic theory and philosophy follows. It includes the word scarcity to start with. So the definition I use today is economics is the production, distribution, and use of goods and services, period. What's money? Money is a management tool. So it's the primary means that human beings use to determine who gets access to goods and services and how much access. Finance is a management system. So it's really easy then to look at those three things independently. Economics is based 100% on facts. It's based on science. Production, distribution, and use of goods and services is 100% fact-based. We can, in fact, that's what farmers do. If a farmer wants to grow corn, he realizes that he has to plant the seeds a certain depth in the soil. He has to have a certain temperature range for the crops to grow. He has to have a certain amount of moisture for a certain period of time. That's all science. If we want to send human beings to the moon, it's 100% based on science. If we want to produce an automobile, if we want to produce a website that allows people to do video conferencing, that's all 100% based on facts. Money and finance is based 100% on everything except the facts, literally. If we realize that we invented money, it's easy to see then that every tiny detail about how money and finance works, we're in control of, 100%. And money and finance do not follow the laws of mathematics or physics. There is nothing in mathematics or physics where the values of things change based on consumer confidence or investor emotion. I mean, really, when I listen now to the news and the financial reports and all that stuff, investors' confidence or investors are skittish today, so the stock market is dropping. Really? How ludicrous that we manage human affairs based on investors' emotional state on any given day, and that we set what's called economic policy based in large part on consumer confidence. Really? You know, I take people to the airport sometimes, and they get on an airplane and they fly places, and I've frequently told people that I take to the airport that when the pilot runs through his checklist, his pre-flight checklist before he takes off and takes you to San Francisco or wherever you're going, there is one thing that is not on his checklist. There is no pilot's checklist that says, do you have confidence the laws of physics are working today? His confidence in the laws of physics are completely irrelevant. He and the airplane have to conform with the laws of physics, but his confidence in them is completely irrelevant. And yet we manage the affairs of the world and our lives based largely on consumer confidence. So it's a little bit of the work that I do and why I think it's important. You know, I think it's important that we run, in particular today with the technology that we have, we need to be knowledgeable, you know, about the facts of the world we live in. And kind of going back to Bucky's thing about integrity, the way I talk about it is we have economics, but we don't pay much attention to economics. We pay attention to money and finance, which is a total distortion of economics. That's the thing we pay attention to. So the net result is that we are doing anything it takes to make money. Destroy the air, got to make money. Destroy the land, got to make money. Destroy the oceans, got to make money. Well, again, we invented money. The idea that we have to make money is ludicrous, ridiculous, and laughable, except for the negative consequences. There are now enough human beings on the planet, and our technology is now so vast that the negative consequences of our technology and the vast number of people using it are so great that we actually need to make some pretty big changes pretty quickly. And constantly the issue is, can we afford it? Really? So, really? We invented money. If we don't have enough money, make more money. That's one of the questions I ask. Why, since we invented money, do we produce less money than we need rather than more money than we need? We invented it. So,
Yeah, well, it's very interesting when I hear you talk about your experience with Buckminster Fuller, because you can kind of get a sense of how he thinks about things and how that may have inspired your thinking about or rethinking fundamental principles about economics. You know, there's a philosopher, I don't remember who it was, but he said something like, it takes extraordinary intelligence to contemplate the obvious. And it's almost like these things like money, finance, sunrise, sunsets, right? We don't really think critically about them. We kind of take them for granted and just buy into this system that
yep,
we were born
yep,
into. And
yep,
what you're going back to the most basic fundamental definitions and questioning those fundamental
yep,
axioms from which our entire economic system is
yep.
predicated on.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So this question of, is there a better system than money and finance for managing human affairs? So I kind of wanted to get into that with you and see what is the alternative that you are dreaming up or proposing? Maybe we can even contrast with that with what is wrong with our current system.
Sure. Um, so Ryan, everybody that uses money or finance or some version of it, whether it's barter, whether, in prisons, people used to use cigarettes as a medium of exchange. Native peoples have been known to use certain beads and rocks and so on. It doesn't matter. Anybody that knows how to do that, which is almost all humanity now, other than certain tribes and groups of people that are really remote in the Amazon and so on, and that don't have much contact with outsiders. Everybody that knows how to do that is operating with a philosophy. And to me, not only do I look at the definitions of words, but then I go and I said, well, what's the philosophy behind those words? And to me, the philosophy behind money and finance is this: what I can control, you can't have. I'm going to withhold it from you unless you give me something in return, in exchange. If I want to make a profit, what I get from you has to be worth more to me than what you are getting from me. So control and withholding from are the foundations of this system. And that's true whether it's a phone or a pencil or an automobile or a landmass called Louisiana or Alaska. United States purchased Louisiana from France and Alaska from Russia. So, but that principle holds true no matter what. Now, everybody that knows how to do this also has a second philosophy. In fact, everybody on earth has a second, and which was the preceding philosophy, and that's the philosophy of sharing with freely. I do most of the cooking in my relationship with my wife. Never at the end of a meal have I taken out my little checkbook, written up a check, and said, honey, this is what you owe me for the meal I've just prepared for you. We parents don't charge their children to provide them food and shelter and medical care and an education. That we don't do that. So everybody knows how to do that. Everybody knows how to share with freely. In fact, that is the original way of interacting with people. We tend to limit it, though. We tend to limit it like parents to children, siblings with each other, maybe with our extended family. We do stuff for our aunts and uncles, and we share freely. We also go to groups that we want to participate with or want to contribute to. We volunteer with our church or with organizations that are working on environmental issues or mental health issues or whatever it might be. Lots of volunteering goes on, so that's an example of sharing with freely. I was I was reading a report, I think from an anthropologist one time, and he was talking about sharing with freely, which is sometimes called the gift economy. And he said that, well, it works in small groups, but we can't scale it up. It doesn't work, beyond a small group. And I have two responses to that. Number one, have we tried it? Have we tried a sharing with freely system on a broad scale? I don't think so. And secondly, there are two technologies that have become widespread in the last 20 years or so. Smartphones. With a smartphone, and I looked up how many people on Earth have cell phones recently. I think it's something like 65 or 66% of all humans have cell phones. I'm presuming that means smartphones. I didn't ask that question. But let's assume that 65% of all humans have smartphones. So we can be in touch with most of humanity. I, as an individual, can be in touch with most of all other individuals on the planet. And we as individuals can be in touch with a good portion of all the information known to humanity from these little instruments that most of us carry around. That changes everything to me. To me, those two technologies, communication technology and access to information processing, those allow us to, on a planetary scale, have a sharing with freely system. We do need to manage things. We need to know how much food we need to grow to feed 7.5 billion people. We need to know how much energy we need for transportation and to provide housing and healthcare, etc. We do need to manage this information, but we also now can do it on a sharing with freely basis on a planetary scale. And that's only become possible in the last, 15, 20 years.
Yeah. So I have a lot of questions there. So the first one would be, I'm envisioning this taking place on a large scale.
Okay.
The first thing that comes up for me is, how do you think people would when you're talking about volunteering and the spirit of sharing your gifts, how would people do jobs that like really suck, that the only reason why people would do them is because of the large financial incentive?
We have a couple of models right now today. One model is education. We require that children get an education. Okay, so that's one thing. We require certain things of us. In terms of jobs we don't necessarily want to do, the military is perhaps the best example. In this country, well, when I was growing up, we had a military draft. Every male had to register when we turned 18 to be eligible for the draft. And the Vietnam War was going on when I became, eligible for the draft. So that's how we already do it. Jobs that there may not be enough volunteers for, we have a draft system set up. So that's one way we can do it.
I see.
Here's something else, Ryan. I think a lot of the jobs that people don't want to do them because we have set them up to make money. Not safety isn't the number one priority. It's what level of safety can we get away with, kind of. In factories and in products we build. We don't build things and we don't produce things in the safest possible way. We produce it in the way that makes the most money. So, yeah, I think that in part, the issue of people don't want to do it will be resolved when we say, human life is our number one priority, and we're not going to, we're going to make work safe. We're not going to have an acceptable level of people getting injured and killed in the work they do. We're going to have work be 100% safe.
Excellent. So my second question comes down to ideas of human nature, and
I love this question.
Yeah, I'm sure you're anticipating it's coming along sometime. And different people have different ideas about, it's kind of like the nature versus nurture question. And well, if people are really greedy assholes, right? I mean, isn't this the whole thing? If everyone was an enlightened Buddha, maybe this would, right? You probably have heard that. What do you think about that?
To me, number one, I don't know what is human nature. I don't know what the nature of human nature is, and I haven't studied it in great detail. But to me, let me just say that my own sense is that the fundamental nature of humans is the ability to choose. So, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, that humans are greedy by nature. I'll give you that. It is obvious that the current system encourages and rewards greedy behavior. Obvious. Take a look. So then the question is, well, can we create a system that, instead of rewarding and encouraging greedy behavior, that we reward and encourage loving and cooperative behavior? Obviously, the answer is yes. I'm hoping that it's obvious that we can create a system that will reward loving and cooperative behavior. Great, let's do that. We will get more loving and cooperative behavior in a system that rewards that. And if the fundamental nature of human beings is that we're greedy, we're still going to get greedy behavior, but we'll get a whole lot less of it in a system that doesn't reward it than we do now. So I'd say let's make a system that encourages different behavior than what we're getting, and regardless of what the nature of human beings is.
Yeah, well, I'm all for that. And there's been some debate recently with some politicians on how to create a system that would at least recognize people's volunteering, contribution to the community, and doing general, whether like nonprofit work or just trying to make the world a better place without the financial incentive in there. So do you have any specific examples or ideas of how we could design a system to encourage this type of behavior and thinking?
Well, I want to point out that we have done such a good job of conditioning ourselves to the current system that it's really difficult. I've talked with hundreds and hundreds of people about these ideas, and there's a number of things that we say about money. Money is a necessity of life. Well, if money was a necessity of life, it would predate human life. It didn't. We didn't find money falling out of the sky, growing out of the ground, or swimming in the water. We invented it. So humans were around before money was around. So money is not a necessity of life. Time is money. Really? Time is not money. Money makes the world go round. No. I actually asked a physicist. I figured I'm going to go to the expert here. I'm going to talk to a physicist. Does money make the world go round? He said, no, money doesn't make the world go round. That's not factual. But here, to me, is the idea that really seals our mental box shut. And it's the idea that there's no such thing as a free lunch. Milton Friedman, famous economist, wrote a book in the 70s called There's No Such Thing as a Free Lunch. I like to point out that there is no record in all human history, any culture, any tradition, an oral tradition, a written tradition, on stone, on papyrus, doesn't matter. No record in all of human history that tells us that the universe charged even one human being ever for anything. It's a completely free lunch, a completely free universe. Oh, but so to even think of something outside of our mindset of mediums of exchange, or I'll do this for you, or share this with you if you give me something in return. It's really hard to think outside that box. So and my point in saying this is that as I pay attention to what's going on in the world, in the environmental movement, in politics, um, almost all of what is being proposed is to change the existing system of money and finance. It's interesting to note that about 80 years ago, after the Great Depression, there was the New Deal, and there were a lot of changes to the economic system, I'm sorry, to the financial system. Well, in the last 30 years or so, we're dismantling the changes of the New Deal. And we're starting to get some of the same results. We had the Great Recession here 8 or 10 years ago. And if we look back historically, that's been the story. We constantly have recessions and depressions. It's a cyclical thing. And given the state of our technology, you know, I'm surprised that we haven't engaged in this question: is there a better system? Long before this. But again, to me, that points out how we've been thoroughly conditioned, and we've bought it. You know, some people say, "Oh, you're not going to get the people on the top to let go of the control and manipulation they have." That, to me, is not the biggest issue, because we've all bought into the system. You know, show me siblings who haven't used money to control each other. Show me parents who haven't used money to control their children. You know, I'm going to take your allowance away if you don't behave. Show me people in relationship, you know, life partners that don't use money to control each other. Show me people that don't use money and haven't bought into the system. We've all bought into it. I buy into it. I go to work and earn money to pay for rent and the things that I use in life. So it's a personal matter as well as a larger, you know, systemic matter. And so to me, almost all of what I hear about people saying, oh, we should do this, that, or the other thing, revolves around changing the system. In the research I've done, the first people that recognized that things had changed was in 1918. There was a group of scientists, technicians, and engineers that said, with the technological leaps that had been made from our Civil War to 1918, so from 1865 to 1918, they said that we are shifting from a condition where we're always struggling to produce enough for a growing population. They said we're starting to produce more than enough. So we're shifting from a condition of relative scarcity to relative abundance. They said money is only good in a condition of scarcity. Once you move into a condition of abundance, money is not the best way of managing things. That was 101 years ago, you know, and to this day, we are not widely engaged in the conversation, is there a better system? They started an organization called Technocracy, which became very popular apparently up until about World War II. And after World War II, it started to lose popularity. There are still people that are engaged in sharing the message of technocracy, not a lot. But they proposed a system. They proposed a system based on access to and use of energy. So a simple idea would be, if we, for example, in the United States, or let's say on a planetary basis, if we produce 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy per person, so 7.5 billion people times 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy per month, your income, my income is 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy. What am I going to use it on? Well, there are things that the community has decided we want to do. So we want to have roads all around the United States so we can get to place easily, safely, quickly. We want to have fire service. We want to have security service, police. So there are things that we do collectively. Okay, certain part of my energy income is going to go to that. And then the rest I can use how I choose. Oh, I may want to build a house. I may want to put an addition onto my house. I may want to have a boat. I may want to take a trip around the world. So that's kind of the basic idea. To me, there are 5 categories of economics. It's energy, materials, process time, human labor, and human know-how. That's what we have to deal with, whether we deal with it directly and manage it directly, or whether we do it the way we're doing it. We've got these 5 things that we're dealing with, but we look at money, the money values we assign to those things. So again, energy, and that is the thing that really has allowed the industrial world that we have today, that you and I, that all of us participate in today, the ability to access and use energy. For the most part, fossil fuels. We're now switching to renewables, but fossil fuels are what powered the Industrial Revolution. Materials, so whether that's iron ore that we mine to produce stethoscopes, x-ray machines, and hospital beds, or to build buildings or automobiles. We can include animals in that. So energy, materials, process time. How long does it take to mine iron ore and then refine it into the various types of steel that we use, or copper, or whatever, sand if we want to make glass? How long does it take to do that? How long does it take to grow corn or berries or nuts or whatever we grow? Human labor, how much human labor? And with expanding technology, we need less and less human labor. It's my understanding that around the time of the American Revolution, 1776, about 240 or 50 years ago, it's my understanding that about 98% of all humans were engaged in farming. Today, it's about 2%. That's remarkable, because we have access, we've been able to use energy to do our work for us. So energy, materials, process time, human labor, and human know-how. And it's interesting because human know-how is a different category because we work from our know-how. Again, getting back to, say, taking a trip across the country. I occasionally talk to people and I say, I just met you, but there's one form of transit that I know you did not consider when you planned your trip to San Francisco. Most people they say, hey, I need to get there fast, I'm going to take an airplane. But if we step back and say, okay, how can I get to San Francisco? Well, you could walk, you could ride a bicycle, you could an automobile or a train or an airplane. But there is one form of transit to San Francisco that you did not consider, and that's teleportation, because we don't know how. We are researching teleportation, and teleportation has apparently has happened with atoms, but not with humans. That's not a category to manage, is a place to come from. We do come from our level of know-how about any particular thing. Transit, medical care, housing, talking with each other, etc. So those are the 4 categories to manage from the level of know-how we have. That's what they proposed. And they talk primarily about energy because that's really the key.
Right. So is what you're saying that the technological development is very important in order to really make this a possibility? Like how dependent are we on these technological developments in order to make this a reality?
Well, excuse me, just 1 second, Ryan. Well, I would say 100% dependent. In my work, I say that economics, nature, technology, there are 5 words. I'm trying to think of them. Economics, nature, technology, environment. There's a 5th one. Those words are synonymous. We tend to think that technology is this new thing, high tech and all that. Take a look at it. It's energy, materials, process time, and when human, in fact, let's step back for a second. Let's look at the universe. On a clear night, if we're away from a city, we can see millions and billions of stars. And through our scientific research, we have come to the consensus that the universe is a gigantic place. There are billions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy, and there are billions of galaxies. It's a huge place. The universe produces stuff, the universe distributes stuff, and the universe uses stuff, with or without human beings. So it turns out that a definition of the universe is a gigantic economy. We haven't noticed that, we haven't called it that, but that's the definition of economics: production, distribution, use of goods and services. So that's nature, that's ecology. All those terms are synonymous. So your question, how dependent are we? 100%. There isn't anything else than technology at one level or another.
Right, right. So maybe the question should be, how dependent is this on technologies we don't yet have?
Zero.
Okay.
Zero. Zero. See, Ryan, if what we are currently doing is we are looking at economics, that's all there is to look at, through the distortion. And I use that word very, very consciously. It is totally distorting of our understanding of the world around us. Okay, so we're looking at it through the distortion of money and finance. If we set that aside, there are two things we can look at. We can look at what is the need. Well, we've got 7.5 billion people on planet Earth. What is the capability of meeting the needs of 7.5 billion people? Well, I have not researched every study that's been done for the last 100 years, but it has been my understanding for many years, because I've kind of paid attention to food and starvation on the planet really almost all my life. And I've spoken with someone who works on this in Washington, D.C. My question was, and it's my understanding, that every time that we have looked at world population and world food production for the last 100 years, excluding World War I and II, every time we've looked at it, the reports come back and say we've got enough food. There is no shortage of food on this planet for everyone. And yet last year, the most recent time I looked, we were on track to have about 9 million human beings starve to death last year, 2018. Around the year 2000, we were at about 40 million people a year. So we have made progress. But keep in mind, whether it was 40 million people a year 19 years ago, or whether it was 9 million people last year, we had enough food to feed every human being on the planet. The United States Commerce Department keeps track of housing in this country, and I occasionally go online and look up the housing statistics. And the one I remember was from 2016, so that was really 2 years ago. So the most recent statistic would be 18, then 17, then 16. The one I remember from 2016 was that at that point, the United States had 16.4 million vacant apartments and houses. The highest estimate I've ever heard is that we have 3.5 million homeless people. So the United States has already produced more than 4 housing units for every homeless person, and we can't solve homelessness. Keep in mind, that statistic does not include all the vacant government property all over the country, all the vacant industrial property, all the vacant business and commercial property, all the vacant hotel and motel space, all the vacant RVs parked all over the country. The United States has a humongous surplus of shelter, and we have up to 3.5 million homeless people. If I said to you, Ryan, it is not possible to produce enough to provide health care for everybody. It's not possible to produce enough tongue depressors and stethoscopes and x-ray machines and hospital beds. It's not possible to train enough medical personnel to take care of everybody. I hope you'd look at me and say, William, you're out of touch. I don't study how many trees we need to grow to produce tongue depressors or how many tons of iron ore we need to mine to produce x-ray machines and hospital beds. But my basic understanding of the world around me tells me we can do these things. Why aren't we doing them? In every case, starving people, homeless people, people without easy access to health care, there is one thing they absolutely have in common. They don't have money. If starving people had money, they would go buy food. Or people who had the food would look over, even as across the world, people in the United States who had the food would look, oh my God, there's millions of people in Africa that are starving. They got a lot of money though. I'm going to get my products over there, my food over there, and say, hey, you need this food, give me your money. So either way we look at it, if those starving people had money, they'd be getting food one way or the other. Same thing with homeless people. The biggest problem is they don't have money. If they had money, they'd get shelter. Or people with the shelter would come knocking on, well, come tapping them on the shoulder when they're sleeping on the streets and in doorways and so on and say, hey, I got a place for you. I've got shelter for you. Give me your money. Same thing with people with health care. Now, that's true for the most part. There are people with mental illness that would want to live outdoors or whatever. But for the most part, those problems that we have with starvation, homelessness, and lack of easy access to healthcare would be resolved if the folks who needed those things had the money.
Right, right. So what I'm hearing you say is you're really emphasizing a lot of the baseline needs such as food, home, and you know some of I remember I think there was one statistic where it said we produce 3 times as much food as there are to feed
I don't
everyone.
think it's that much, but it's a substantial surplus. It is a substantial surplus. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Highlighting the fact that distribution is really what the problem is.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you think about, and you had mentioned this a little bit earlier, so I wanted to go back to this, about how people would try to cooperate or take turns with like luxury goods. Like, well, I want to drive, go around the planet on my really expensive yacht that cost $4 million. How would those things be? Like currently, money would just, well, I don't have the money, so I can't do that. But Bill Gates can do that if he wanted to. So how would those things be negotiated?
Yeah. I title my work Billions of Billionaires. And the reason why I did that is Bucky Fuller, I think around 1980, said something, I'm paraphrasing what he said, that we effectively have, and at that point the population of the planet was 4.5 billion. He said we effectively have 4.5 billion billionaires aboard Spaceship Earth who have yet to be informed of their good fortune. Well, today in the year 2019, we effectively have 7.5 billion billionaires aboard Spaceship Earth, and we've still yet to be informed of our good fortune. So, but that's a good question. Does that mean that 7.5 billion people can have a big yacht? No, that won't work. But here's the interesting thing, that wealth to me is defined as access. And when I told you about money, money is a tool that determines who gets access to goods and services and how much access. So it turns out that people who have yachts typically, number one, don't use those yachts full time. And typically, number two, they're much bigger than they need to be for one person. So I would suspect that with a different perspective or a different management system, there would be very few of these mega yachts that one person or one tiny little group of people has access to permanently, whether they are using them or not. Um, but we could certainly provide access to things like yachts or whatever to almost anybody who wanted that, with a system that is about access. Because if I want to go on a yacht, me personally, I don't really have much interest. Or if I did have interest, it would be for one little trip someplace. And then somebody else can have that yacht or use that yacht for the rest of the year or 40 years or whatever. Um, so again, this is about access to goods and services, not about ownership. Because right now we're all about ownership. And even though I may use something very minimally, I got ownership and nobody else can use it. We need to stop that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What do you think about how? What you're saying is, it's about the access to things, which I understand.
To goods and services. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you mean by that. What about the supply of goods, right? So the supply of goods is still going to be like, let's say, I can't think of an example. Yacht may not be the best example, but let's say that, building a fancy yacht takes up a lot of resources, a lot of trees and that kind of thing. So if everyone wanted something, you may have a lot of demand for it, and everyone may have access to it, but the supply itself, given that we live in a finite world of 3D physical reality, right? Wouldn't there be a finite supply of goods?
Yes, absolutely. Isn't there a finite supply of goods and services right now?
Right. So,
Right.
so what I'm saying is, would that make, because that's the whole argument of like inflation, right? Is you have too much money that outruns the supply of goods, so that your money becomes devalued because there's too much money chasing the same amount of goods. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Ryan, it's interesting. Again, I try to make my work really accessible. I have so often talked to people and they say, I don't understand economics. And my response to that is, if you know how to speak a language, if you can dress yourself, if you can kind of prepare a meal for yourself, if you can get from point A to point B in a city, you understand economics perfectly. It's called living. What you don't understand is money and finance. And the reason you don't understand money and finance is by design. Again, we'll go back to, we invented money. Every tiny detail about how money works is by design. If it's not understandable to most people, it's because we designed it that way. So, I'm sorry, what I wanted to say that, but your question was,
Oh,
about finite,
just to your point,
about
there's a reason
finite,
why they call economics the dismal science.
because we're really talking about money and finance. That's
Mm.
what we're talking about. And
Mm.
because there's a fundamental misunderstanding, and Bucky Fuller talked about um, the issue of scarcity, and he said that in the 1840s, I think 1846, something like that, there was a economist or researcher named Thomas Malthus that did an inventory of the world's resources for the British East India Company. His report came back and said, we have a finite amount of resources and we have a population increasing in a geometric rate. He says, therefore, human beings exist in a fundamental condition of scarcity. There's a scarcity of resources. We've got a growing population. Sorry, too bad. That's just the way it is. It's interesting now, we have used that idea to justify starvation. Well, it's just the way it is. We can't do anything about it. It's a scarce world. The thing Bucky Fuller pointed out is that the thing that Thomas Malthus did not take into account is know-how. And the example to me that stands out, that I just love, that Bucky gave, he said that when the first transatlantic cable was laid, it was a telegraph cable. So once the telegraph was invented, there was a cable that was laid from North America to Europe. He said that first transatlantic cable weighed something like 700,000 tons. Today, and this was 30 years ago in the 80s, he said a 700-pound satellite carries more communications than a 700,000-ton cable did 40, 50, 60 years previous. So our know-how, our ability to use energy, materials, has grown so fast, it's growing far faster than population. Just take a look at it. Smartphones, in the last century, the year 2000, prior, in the 1900s, there was kind of an understanding. There were news reports, there were TV programs. It was kind of oriented around this idea that somewhere around the year 2000, the turn of the century, our technology would be so good, our machines will do so much of our work for us, we won't have to work much anymore. Now, our technology is way better than we thought it was going to be, way better. And yet, we keep electing politicians that promise to create new jobs. And my question is, why? Why don't we want our time? Why don't we want our lives? That's the point of technology, to do our work for us. See, I have a solution to this issue of jobs. If we really want full employment, we need a 6-word law on planet Earth. All tools and machines are outlawed. Instantaneous full employment. Everybody will be going out poking our fingers in the ground to plant seeds to grow our food for us. Instantaneous full employment. I don't think we'll have many volunteers for that, because we have the technology to produce such a great standard of living and quality of life without destroying our home planet in the process of living on our planet. It's really kind of an insane system we have. The Pope a few years ago said that we're on a suicide mission. We're on a suicide plan. It's 100% right. There is no other term appropriate. We are on a suicide program. And the idea that we are going to change things dramatically and still maintain a money and finance-based system, or still maintain a system that's based on the idea, what I can control, you can't have, it isn't going to work. We do need that mindset makeover. We do need to understand things differently. And when we look at life, economics, nature, technology directly rather than through the distortion of money and finance, we will see that we've got it made. I read news reports every once in a while of counterfeit goods, knockoffs of Fendi handbags or whatever. They discover thousands of them and then they destroy them. Really? So we're constantly destroying things because they are not made by the original manufacturer. There's this idea that capitalism is such an efficient system. We have literally mountains of trash all over the world. If this is an efficient system, please show me an inefficient system. You got to be kidding me. The waste and the destruction of our planet is the result of this system. I think it's insane. I think it's a suicide program, and it's anything but efficient. And I'm sorry, you actually had a question there, which I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent.
Oh, it's okay. I wanted to ask a different question, and this question will give me a good sense of kind of how you're practically thinking about these things. Mm-hmm. So if you were the dictator of planet Earth, and you had and you had all the power to do whatever the hell you wanted to do and change and tweak all of the systems, I mean, have you thought of very concretely where one would start in trying to shift from this capitalist system that you just described to what you're envisioning?
Yeah, to me, education is the number one thing, and that's why I do the work I do. I think we need to be informed, and to me, Buckminster Fuller was first and foremost an educator. He did all this research, and then he shared it with people. So that to me is the number one thing, is we need to educate ourselves. Oh, and I started to say that I try to make this simple. You know, when people say that they don't understand economics, no, you understand economics perfectly. It's money and finance you don't understand. And economics can be understood very simply. I didn't go to school and study economics. I, for the most part, talk to people, and I read news reports. I look at Yahoo, and I scan the news through there. I listen to television reports on financial news and so on. So I access, and then I do specific information like on housing statistics and whatnot. But the primary place I deal in is what's available to everybody. This is not anything mysterious. Once we can make the distinction, economics is here, money is here, and finance is here, and we understand the difference between the two, when we listen to news reports or read news reports or magazine articles, we can easily distinguish between what is being talked about here, economics, money, or finance. So to me, that's number one, that we need to educate ourselves, and it's easy. We need to share that information with each other. Share it with as many people as you can, and then look for ways to do things for free. When I was growing up, it was the norm was for, in a family, the man would go out and earn money, the woman would stay home and manage the household and raise the children. Well, today, the norm is for both parents to be going out and earning money and paying someone else to raise the children, childcare. So what we have done over time is we are monetizing literally everything. And really, that's the number one, well, that's one of the primary goals of the system of money and finance, is to monetize everything in the universe. If you'll notice, we are planning to mine asteroids, monetize asteroids. People want to monetize the moon, the resources on the moon. Anybody can pay to name a star after myself or someone else. So we are literally monetizing everything. Part of the way we can get to a different system is to unwind that, to begin to practice demonetizing as much as we can, do as much as we can for free, look for new ways to do things. There's an example. There is a town in England, Todmorden, and a woman there somehow got the idea to have food be freely available to everyone in the community. So she got the community to allow food crops to be grown everywhere, in every little public strip, everywhere in public, so that now anybody can go and take it. You want a tomato, you're walking by a tomato, you grab a tomato. So they are rapidly making food freely available in the town of Todmorden. I forget the name of the program. Yeah, but it is being adopted by cities around the world. That's an example of how we can demonetize and unwind ourselves from the system that we have wound ourselves so tightly into. Look for ways to do things for free. The work that I do, I don't charge for it. You know, I've talked with groups, I do my writing online. What you're doing, the podcast you do, you don't charge for it, so you find a way to share things freely. We need to just keep doing that more and more.
You know, it reminds me of a funny story when Seattle started a food forest right in the middle of one of their public parks. And
Mm.
someone said, but what happens if homeless people will go and take the food? It's like, that's the entire point of it. Well, William, we're coming to the end of our time here, but this has been such a pleasure to talk to you about all of these things. And just to close, guys, can you tell us a little bit more about your work, your business, your website, your book?
Well, I'm looking for more ways to share this. So when you invited me to participate, Ryan, I'm so grateful, you know, because you are doing what I am trying to do. You're sharing freely with people, sharing the message with people. So I, if when people invite me to participate, like you did, I make myself available to participate. I write articles periodically, and I am working on that book. The book is online. It's been online for a number of years now. Um, I'm looking for new ways, to share the message. And so if people want me to either write or speak on specific topics, I am available to do that. Um, want me to speak? I'm looking for more ways to share the message and to support other projects like the one Todd Morden. There are like open source technology. There's I recently heard from actually one of somebody I met who shared with me a program called Buy Nothing, and it's apparently have you heard of it?
No.
Yeah, it's apparently a Facebook based program where people in the neighborhood can get together and can make requests of what is needed. I need a snow shovel. And somebody else can say, hey, I got a snow shovel here, you can have it. And it's my understanding that the rule is no money. It's not for sale. Everything that is asked for and made available on Buy Nothing is for free. It has to be for free. This is a brilliant example of doing this so that we products can be not thrown away and can be used much more efficiently. That's a brilliant way of idea, to do what I'm talking about here. Use things more completely and share them freely. There's another thing that we should consider. You asked the question about, well, if everybody wants a yacht or so on. So much of what we are doing currently is we buy, say, a saw. If I have a building project, I buy a saw, and for the most part, I keep that saw whether I ever use it again or not. In a system where things are abundant, we don't need to hoard things. People are concerned that with this idea of making things freely available, that people will hoard things. Well, stand back and take a look for a second. Who hoards air? Nobody hoards air because there's so much of it. See, we have a mindset called things are scarce. Well, if things are abundant, we don't hoard them and we don't pay for them. I meet people and I sometimes say to people, I just met you 10 minutes ago, but I'm going to tell you 3 facts about your life. Tell me if I'm wrong. Number 1, you've never been sent a bill for all the air that you've breathed all your life. Everybody said, no, never been sent a bill. Number 2, you've never been sent a bill for all the sunshine that has fallen on your body all your life. I'm seeing some sunshine on you right now, Ryan. And number 3, you've never been sent a bill for all the rainfall that has fallen on you or your property, your house, your car, etc. all your life. Why not? There's too much of it. There's an abundance of air. There's an abundance of sunshine. There's an abundance of rainfall in total. And no one has yet figured out a way to control the supply of air, sunshine, and rainfall and withhold it from other people. Now, so that demonstrates to us that in a condition of abundance, we don't hoard things. There's no need to. Why would I hoard something that I can get freely anytime I need it? Why would I hoard food if food is freely available and easily available? Here's one way, though, that we are, in fact, making air, that we are controlling air. We're controlling clean air. I don't know if you've heard, but there were news reports 3-4 years ago that as a business enterprise, and I think kind of as a pet rock kind of idea, people in Australia and in England were bottling air, fresh air, and sending it to China, selling it to people in China because
I remember that.
Yeah, the pollution in China is so severe that, well, people do. In fact, they have to wear masks or they wear oxygen bottles. So that is a way we are starting to monetize something that is abundant by making clean air scarce. This system, money and finance, smack in the middle of abundance, creates scarcity in order to maintain the system. Again, I think that's crazy. But
You know, on your website, I think you called some of this work reality-based economics.
yes, that's kind of the term I use. There's lots of terms. In fact, if you go and read my book, I think there's about 50 different titles I wrote in because I think every one of them could be applicable. But I think reality-based economics, to me, is the most useful title to this because we're looking at reality, factual, provable reality-based economics. That's what we need to do. Again, set aside the distortion of money and finance. Let's look at reality.
Another thing you can name it is make economics fun again.
I love it. I love it. Yes.
I'll wear my hat.
I love it. Make economics fun again. I love it. See, the opportunity, Ryan, is that we can have a system. It is now possible to have a system where we encourage people to do what we love to do, what we have fun doing, what we have joy in doing, rather than doing whatever it takes to make money. You know, the artists and musicians and healers and teachers are constantly encouraged, oh, do what's practical. Do what'll make you money and make a good living. Boy, the things that bring joy, richness, fulfillment to life, we don't encourage people to do. Really? Again, smack in the middle of incredible abundance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, William, this has been an absolute blast, and I want to thank you so much for your time. And
You're
I
welcome.
think you have a lot of important things to share with the world. So I'm happy to help share that
Thank you.
as much as I can.
Sure. Yeah, and there are more things we can talk about if you at some point want to do that, or other people want to get in touch with me. You know, my contact information is available. Get in touch with me.
Great. We'll do another one for sure.
Cool. Thank you for what you're doing, Ryan.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you too.